My name is Jamon McKinney, or you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Welcome everyone to the Juice Alert, episode number 27. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can find me on YouTube as well as podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, all that great stuff. A great show is lined up today for you, ladies and gentlemen. And in this episode, I'm covering everything college football related. I have 13 great topics to discuss today. Some of those topics include Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Jim Harbaugh, Kirby Smart, Luke Fickell, Zach Wilson, the BYU quarterback. We'll talk about Kedon Slovis, the USC quarterback as well. A lot of great stuff to talk about today right here, But before I get started, I just wanted to say, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video right about now. It definitely helps out this channel and my show. Okay, and also, you guys can follow me on social media as well if you want to connect with me on a very high note, or if you want to troll me or come in my DMs and say, your takes suck, your takes stink. Hey, feel free to do it. You can tag me on Twitter, things of that nature, So, listen, I have some social media accounts I just wanted to mention right here. You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram account is GHIMAN_MCKINNEY. And my personal Twitter account is at GHIMANMCKINNEY. And also, if you want to get specific updates in regards to this show, you can follow the Instagram and Twitter accounts for the show. On Instagram, you can follow that account at the Juice Alert _, and on Twitter, you can find that account at the Juice Alert. Okay, everyone, so enough talk about those things. Let's jump right into the show. I want to talk about the college football playoffs because some people believe the college football playoffs should be expanded. Some people believe the college football playoffs should not be expanded. Currently, the format pretty much goes as follows, basically a committee of a bunch of people, they sit down, they watch these games, they collect the data, and by the end of the year, they pick the 4 best teams, or in some cases, the 4 most deserving teams to make the college football playoffs. So currently, we have a 4-team playoff system. There are 2 college football playoff games, 2 semifinal games, and then obviously whoever wins those games gets to play for the national title. So the question I want to answer today is, should the college football playoffs be expanded? Or should the college football playoffs not be expanded? And I really thought about this topic for a long period of time. And about a year ago, if you would have asked me this question, I would have told you, nope, no way, no how, you should not expand the college football playoffs. That'd be dumb. That's what I would have told you about a year ago. But I thought about this, and my opinion has changed. I believe the college football playoffs should be expanded. Now, honestly, if the playoffs don't expand at any point in my lifetime, I'm okay with that because I think the 4-team playoff system is a decent way to go about things. But I do think if college football wants to really, up the ante a little bit, if they want to really, improve their sport, they should expand the college football playoffs, and I'll tell you why, okay? First of all, let me get something off my chest because there's this narrative that these lower level teams like BYU, like Cincinnati, or even teams like, I don't know, the Texas A&Ms of the world, people can say they're going to get blown out if they make the college football playoffs. You can't allow them into the playoffs because they're going to get blown out. Folks, have you been watching the college football playoffs over the past couple of years? Oklahoma got boat raced by LSU last year. Ohio State, they got blown out 31-0 a couple of years ago versus Clemson. Did you see Michigan State versus Alabama? These are top of the level powerhouse schools we're talking about that have gotten blown out in the past. Heck, Clemson in 2017 got dominated in the college football playoffs by Alabama. So they're Power 5 level schools getting blown out in these games regardless of who makes it in. So I just wanted to throw that out there and just push away that narrative very quickly. These teams deserve a shot. You want to know why they deserve a shot? They deserve a shot because we've even seen the Ohio States, the Clemsons, and the Oklahomas of the world get blown out in the college football playoffs. But let me say this. I firmly believe the college football playoff is trying to reward perfection way too much. Okay, what do I mean by that? Because let's compare college football to the NFL. I consider the NFL to be the king of sports in America. And a big reason why I believe that is because the NFL does not stress being perfect. I'll give you an example. The New York Jets might not win a single game in 2020. But guess what? They get a chance to draft Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields with the #1 overall pick. And it's kind of weird, but they get rewarded for being awful, you know? Meanwhile, in college football, if you're the Rutgers of the world, if you're the Oregon States of the world, you're just left out there to hang and dry, and you still have to compete with the Ohio States, with the Oklahomas, with the Clemsons of the world as far as recruiting goes, and you have no shot. That's the harsh reality right now in college football. And see, here's the thing, people. Imagine if Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady had one bad game this season, and that one bad game cost them an opportunity to make the playoffs. Imagine if that happened. That's kind of how college football works right now, because as we speak today, you know, if you're a one-loss team that gets blown out, then you virtually have no shot to make it into the Final Four. And some people can say, well, I like that. You know, that shows the regular season matters. And hey, if that's the argument you want to make, that's fine. But imagine the Green Bay Packers or the New England Patriots of old when Tom Brady was there, you know, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Imagine if Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers had one bad game, and because they had that one bad game, they don't get a chance to make the playoffs, and they don't get a chance to win the Super Bowl. I think that's very, very dumb. I like the fact that the NFL included a 7th playoff team, because now we get an opportunity to potentially see a very good young quarterback in Kyler Murray make the NFL playoffs. But college football stingy. They're only going to let 4 playoff teams in, okay? You know, Ohio State in 2018 had enough talent to win a national title, but they got blown out by Purdue, and the College Football Playoff Committee said, nope, you're out. Same thing in 2017. Got blown out by Iowa, but despite, you know, scheduling some tough opponents, despite beating ranked opponents, despite having a pretty good season, despite that loss, Ohio State was left out the college football playoffs. The same thing can be said for Georgia. Georgia in 2019, they went 12-2, had a very good stellar season. They didn't make the playoffs because they had one bad Saturday. Same thing in 2018. They went 11-3, and they lost in the Sugar Bowl. But you want to know why they lost in the Sugar Bowl? They lost in the Sugar Bowl because they did not care about that bowl game, because the College Football Playoff Committee said, you're not good enough to compete for a national title because you weren't perfect for 2 Saturdays. Oregon last year. Oregon was the winner of the Rose Bowl, and they don't get a chance to compete for a national title, you know, despite the fact that they actually had the balls to go out and schedule number 16 Auburn to open the season. Something that Alabama didn't do, something that Clemson didn't do, something Ohio State didn't do. Oregon had the balls to go and schedule a tough SEC opponent, and their season's over the first game of the season because they fall short to a very good Auburn team. I'm sorry, people, but the idea that we need to be perfect is causing some of these teams in college football to schedule nothing but cupcakes. The thing I like about the NFL is that we get to see Packers versus Buccaneers, Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady. We get to see Seahawks versus Rams. We get to see the Chiefs versus Saints this year. Folks, when is the last time we've seen Alabama and Ohio State play a game in the regular season that actually mattered? When is the last time we've seen Florida play a team like Clemson that actually was very good out of conference in the regular season? We saw Notre Dame and Clemson this year, but that happens once every blue moon. And I truly think that if we allow more teams to make it into the college football playoffs, we will see better regular season matchups, and maybe Nick Saban will have the balls to actually schedule some tougher opponents instead of playing the Citadel the second to last week of the season, okay? Because when we talk about the fact that we need to have only 4 teams in the college football playoffs, it's pretty much a race to perfection for these teams. It's all about being undefeated. It's all about who has, the best loss. When in fact, we should be judging these teams based on, who actually deserves to make the playoffs based on the games that are actually played. And we need to actually reward the Auburns and the Oregons of the world that actually have the balls to go out and play each other the first game of the season. We don't get to reward those people, College football right now is all about who's undefeated and who has the most 4- and 5-star players. It's not about quality wins. And people can say, well, Clemson and Alabama are going to run college football no matter what, even if you include more teams in the playoffs. Well, guess what, people? Newsflash. Peyton Manning made the playoffs virtually every single year in his prime. When's the last time we've seen Aaron Rodgers miss the playoffs? When's the next time you think Patrick Mahomes is not going to win his division? Tom Brady's been in the playoffs virtually every single year throughout his prime, minus 1 year in which he got injured. The Patriots dynasty was going to dominate whether there were a couple of teams that make the playoffs or not. I'm sorry, people, but the dominant teams are going to be there. That doesn't mean that we should, exclude the other teams that actually, go out their way to schedule tough opponents, that actually have quality wins on their schedule, that are actually teams that are pretty good, that deserve a shot at the national title. We should not exclude those teams for all those reasons that I mentioned, okay? And I truly believe this. I believe that if we expand the college football playoffs over time, this could benefit college football. You want to know why? Because we get more teams in the playoffs, more of these teams get national TV recognition, things of that nature, and we get more national title contenders. The problem with college football right now and why there's an imbalance in power is because there's only so many teams that have the capability to win national titles, because we have Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State dominating recruiting right now. But you want to know why that's the case? It's not because there are bad coaches out there. Oregon, USC, all these other schools, they have good coaches. The problem is their pitch to these kids are different than the pitch that Nick Saban or Ryan Day or Dabo Swinney can give another student, that he's recruiting. Because here's the reality, people. You could talk about Oregon, the nice facilities, the great coaching staff. Same thing with Texas A&M. Even to a certain degree, LSU in certain respects. But you want to know why some of these kids are choosing the Clemsons, the Ohio States, and the Alabamas of the world over some of these middle-pack schools? It's not because they don't like these schools. It's not because they have bad recruiting trips. It's because Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State and those powerhouse teams have something that these other teams don't have. A shot to win a national title. And if you include more teams in the playoffs, guess what? Whether you like it or not, those teams have a shot to win the national title because they're actually in the playoffs. The problem with the Cincinnatis of the world, the problem with the BYUs of the world, the problem with the Penn States of the world, and even the problem with the Michigans of the world is they don't have a shot to even get into the playoffs. Imagine how much the power would shift if Jim Harbaugh can tell a recruit, hey, you have a legitimate shot to win a national title at the University of Michigan. And there's actual living proof of it by Michigan being a top 10 to 8 team every single year and making the playoffs. Imagine if James Franklin could do the same thing. Imagine if Luke Fickell right now at the University of Cincinnati can do the same thing. Imagine if Luke Fickell could go to his recruits and say, hey, listen, did you see us in the college football playoffs last year? Yeah, you have a legitimate shot to win a national title if you come to the University of Cincinnati. I'm sorry, people, but if that happens, there's a huge shift in college football. And let's be real, these bowl games would be much, much more compelling. Imagine the Rose Bowl actually meaning something Imagine the Cotton Bowl having, Ohio State and Clemson every single year. Imagine the Peach Bowl having Georgia and Alabama competing. Imagine the Sugar Bowl having LSU every single year in the playoffs. I'm sorry, people, but there's an imbalance in college football, and I truly believe that over time, we can shift that imbalance in college football if we expand the college football playoffs. So that's where I stand on this subject. For all the reasons that I mentioned, I believe the college football playoffs should be expanded. Now, whether you move to 6 teams, to 8 teams, to 16 teams, I don't really care particularly. I think that 16 teams might be a little bit too much. I think that 6 or 8 teams is about the sweet spot, but that's just my opinion. Ultimately, I believe, as I speak today, the college football playoffs should be expanded. So, enough talking about the college football playoffs. I want to discuss Ohio State starting quarterback Justin Fields. I'm going to make a bold statement right now. I will not be shocked if Justin Fields becomes the number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. Don't be surprised if Justin Fields goes number 1 overall. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not making that prediction. I'm not predicting Justin Fields will go number 1 overall. I'm just laying out the fact that it's a real possibility, okay? Everyone's talking about Trevor Lawrence, how he's so great, he's NFL ready right now. And listen, Trevor Lawrence is an amazing prospect. And right now, I say that he's probably a better quarterback than Justin Fields. He's got a big-time arm, he's bigger, and he's more accomplished at the college level. He's got more experience, and he's won a national title. Trevor Lawrence definitely deserves our respect. But keep in mind, people, remember when everyone anointed Sam Darnold a couple of years ago and said, Sam Darnold will be the number 1 overall pick even if he came out his freshman year. Oh, Sam Darnold, he's a can't-miss prospect. You can't miss with Sam Darnold. No one is going to challenge Sam Darnold for being the number 1 overall pick. And ding, 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 Baker Mayfield starts ringing at the door, and Baker Mayfield becomes the number 1 overall pick to the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people heading into that year did not think that was a possibility. Kyler Murray, a couple of years ago, came out of nowhere, folks. He was a cast off at Texas A&M. And eventually, he becomes the number 1 overall pick out of Oklahoma. No one saw that coming. Mitchell Trubisky. Did anyone see Mitchell Trubisky coming out of nowhere to overtake Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson in his draft class? Whether it was the right pick or not, Mitchell Trubisky came out of nowhere a couple of years ago in his draft class. No one knew who Mitchell Trubisky was to start the season. Tua Tagovailoa. Everyone kept saying, Tua's a can't-miss prospect. No one's going to challenge Tua. Tua gets injured. Joe Burrow, rises up the draft boards, wins the Heisman Trophy, wins the national title. Boom. Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick to the Cincinnati Bengals. Who would have thought that Daniel Jones would have been the number 6 overall pick to the New York Giants? Folks, there are surprises all the time. We don't know what these NFL GMs draft board looks like. That's all I'm saying, okay? And listen, people, Justin Fields is a big-time prospect, He's got a really strong arm. He makes really good decisions. He's very accurate, as far as throwing the football down the field. And he's a dynamic runner of the football as well. And last year, Justin Fields had an amazing season, and no one talked about him. He went 13 and 1 as a starter last year, completed 67% of his throws. He threw for 41 touchdowns, only had 3 interceptions, and that was only in the air. And you people are trying to tell me that, the gap between him and Trevor Lawrence is wide. I disagree. I don't think the gap between Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence is as wide as you people make it out to be. And like I mentioned earlier, Justin Fields had all those touchdowns. That was only in the air. I didn't even mention what he was doing on the ground as a runner of the football. This year, Justin Fields has improved tremendously as a passer. I think last year, if Justin Fields would have came out, he would have been probably a mid or a late first-round pick. But now, as we speak today, Justin Fields, in my opinion, is worth a top 5 pick. Not worth just a first round pick. He's worth a top 5 pick if you're all in on his skill set. This year, Justin Fields, in 5 games played, is completing 78% of his throws. He's thrown 15 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions in 5 games played so far. And like I mentioned earlier, that's only in the air. He's a dynamic runner of the football. And he reminds me of Deshaun Watson. And I think Deshaun Watson's pretty darn good. He's a top 5 quarterback right now, okay? Listen, people, I'm not here to tell you who's better. I'm not trying to tell you that Justin Fields is going to be a Hall of Fame level player one day, or even that Trevor Lawrence is guaranteed to have success in the NFL. Everything is a crapshoot. All I'm saying is, if you think for 1 second that NFL general managers are not going to be forced to have a sit-down conversation of debating whether Justin Fields is worth the number overall pick, I think you're crazy, because he's that good and he's only going to get better and better. Justin Fields is still not a finished product, and honestly, if he were to go to the NFL, I think that he can hit the ground running. The guy is very smart, he makes very good decisions, and he's a very good athlete. He's very, very mobile, and that's so key for today's NFL, because if you're able to extend plays and run the football effectively at the quarterback position, it makes your transition to the NFL a lot easier than your Josh Rosen, who's a traditional pocket passer, who's pretty much panicking every time he's dropping back to throw because, well, he just can't escape a sack. You can have a functional offense with a young mobile quarterback, despite him maybe not being able to read defenses or process very quickly. I know Patrick Mahomes about a month or two ago said, I'm just now starting to learn how to read defenses. But Patrick Mahomes was able to survive because, well, he got some wheels on him, And Justin Fields, he's a much better athlete than one Patrick Mahomes. Not saying he's a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes, but he's definitely the better athlete. So, look, Trevor Lawrence, he's a generational talent. So is Justin Fields. So, all I'm saying is, I can see a scenario where Justin Fields continues to dominate. He maybe wins a national title because Ohio State, they have a good enough team to win a national title this year. I'm not kidding you. They're loaded once again. If Justin Fields performs well in his bowl game and continues to perform at a high level these next few games of the season, don't be shocked if he rises up draft boards and he overtakes Trevor Lawrence as the number one overall pick. Don't be shocked, people. So all I'm saying is Justin Fields is the real prospect. I will not be shocked if he goes number overall, even over Trevor Lawrence. Okay, let me shift to Trevor Lawrence and the New York Jets. So, it's pretty obvious that most people believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, earlier in the show, I threw out the idea that Justin Fields could be the number 1 overall pick, but I'm just going to assume that Trevor Lawrence doesn't get overtaken as the number 1 overall pick. And for what it's worth, Trevor Lawrence, he's an amazing prospect. He's as close to a perfect prospect as you probably can get at the quarterback position. He's got the experience. He's got the pedigree. He's won a national title. He's a smart guy. He's got the intangibles. He's got the size. He's got a rocket arm. There's a lot to like about Trevor Lawrence. So we're going to assume the Jets probably don't win another game in 2020 because they're that bad. And we're going to assume that Trevor Lawrence is the guy in 2021 as far as the draft is concerned, okay? If the Jets had the number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, should Trevor Lawrence avoid the New York Jets? That's the question I'm going to tackle today. Now, before I answer that question, I don't anticipate that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy that says, I don't want to play for the Jets. I don't think that he's going to, run away from that challenge. That's just my opinion, however. Whether you agree with my opinion or not, if Trevor Lawrence decides to ultimately avoid playing for the New York Jets, I'm not going to blame Trevor Lawrence one bit. I'm not going to be the guy that crushes him for making that move if he chooses to do so. Here's why. Where a quarterback lands matters, people. Lamar Jackson landed in a great situation in Baltimore. That's a big reason why he is a successful quarterback. Josh Allen landed in a great situation in Buffalo. Russell Wilson lands with a great defense that was historically great, actually, in the Legion of Boom. He lands with a great head coach in Pete Carroll. He gets to Super Bowls. Tom Brady lands with Bill Belichick. Oh, it's a coincidence. He wins multiple Super Bowls. Aaron Rodgers gets a great opportunity to learn and sit behind Brett Favre for 3 years. He goes to a pretty well-run organization. Oh, he has success. Patrick Mahomes. He goes to Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs with A-plus weapons, a great offensive line, a great running game, and goes to a team that has a great infrastructure. The Jets right now are a terrible roster. They don't have a lot of great wide receivers outside of Denzel Mims. Their offensive line is atrocious. The defense is not very good. They just fired Greg Williams, their defensive coordinator. Adam Gase is probably going to get fired. And listen, people, Eli Manning is probably going to make the Hall of Fame because he chose to play for the New York Giants and not the Chargers. If Trevor Lawrence avoids the Jets, I'm not going to blame him one bit. However, my opinion is this. I believe that Trevor Lawrence should think twice before avoiding the New York Jets organization. Here's why. Here's the harsh reality, people. Whether Trevor Lawrence stays in school for another year or he avoids the Jets and says, I'm not going to play for you guys, he's going to go to a bad team. Because here's the reality. The Jaguars aren't going anywhere. The Detroit Lions aren't going anywhere. The Atlanta Falcons aren't going anywhere. Dysfunctional teams, dysfunctional organizations. These teams are not going anywhere, people. So if the Jets can't get Trevor Lawrence, who's to say Trevor Lawrence can avoid the dysfunctional Jaguars? Who's to say he can avoid the dysfunctional Detroit Lions? I can go on and on. He's going to go to a bad team. He's going to go to a bad franchise regardless if he stays in school or not. Let's say Trevor Lawrence decides to come back to Clemson for another year in school. Do you know what 3 or 4 NFL franchises are going to do? They're going to do exactly what the Jets are doing. They're going to do exactly what the Jaguars are doing right now. They're going to strip everything down. They're going to fire their head coaches. They're going to fire their coordinators. And they're going to do everything in their power to try to get the number 1 overall pick. And that guy will be Trevor Lawrence. Because as good as Kedon Slovis is, Trevor Lawrence is a better prospect than him. He will probably be the number 1 overall pick next year as well. And who's to say that the New York Jets are going anywhere? Okay? You could try to avoid the Jets this year. They could have the number 1 overall pick next year. If you're a top 10 overall pick and you're a highly coveted quarterback, you're going to go to a bad roster more than likely. Look at Kyler Murray. Look at Dwayne Haskins. Look at Daniel Jones. Look at Joe Burrow. Look at Justin Herbert. Look at Jared Goff. Look at Baker Mayfield. Look at Sam Darnold. Look at Josh Rosen. Of course, you've got the Rams. You've got the Browns, who are teams that were terrible, but they've improved their team. Obviously, the Arizona Cardinals are doing some good things. But initially, those teams were bad, okay? So whether Trevor Lawrence likes it or not, he's probably going to go to a dysfunctional team, and he's going to inherit a bad roster. And again, that roster could get better over time. But the harsh reality is he's not going to be going to a contending team from day number 1. That's not going to happen. Here's another thing to think about. What if Trevor Lawrence goes back to school and he gets injured? That could cost Trevor Lawrence millions of dollars if he's not able to return as the same player that he once was. That could definitely affect his draft stock, and that definitely could affect his pocketbooks, okay? Here's another thing to think about. What if Trevor Lawrence tells the New York Jets, oh, I don't like your team, I'm not going to play for you? And what if the Jets say, we flat out don't care, we're not trading the pick? Then what happens? Then you basically already lost the fan base, players in the locker room are already skeptical of you before you ever enter the building. That's not a good situation to be in. So you'll be putting yourself in a very harmful situation as far as the fan base and the coaching staff and the players go in that locker room. If you say, I don't want to play for the Jets, and the Jets end up saying, we don't care, we're not trading the pick, we're drafting you anyway, no matter if you want to come play for us or not. And then you can say, well, he could get traded to another team. Yeah, maybe that's true, but some teams could be turned off by that. They can say, man, Trevor Lawrence doesn't want to play for the Jets. What if he doesn't want to play for my team? Why should I trade for Trevor Lawrence? So I'm just saying there's a lot of crazy things that could happen if that happens, you know. And listen, I know what you're probably thinking. Adam Gase is going to get fired. The Jets probably aren't going to get a great head coach next year. And that might be the case, but let's think about what the next New York Jets head coach is going to have to work with. Obviously, the roster needs help. You need to get better players on that roster. And obviously, there is some dysfunction at the top. I totally get it, 100%. But the next head coach, more than likely, is going to get an opportunity to coach Trevor Lawrence. You mean to tell me Eric Bieniemy, Robert Saleh, and some of these top-level head coaching candidates are not going to salvage at the moment to maybe get their hands on Trevor Lawrence to coach, to be their quarterback in the future on a rookie contract where you can spend a bunch of money and put stuff around him? I think Trevor Lawrence being such a high commodity makes the Jets much more attractive than you think. Also, the New York Jets have a ton of cap space. And also, they're a big-time market. They're not a small market like Green Bay, Wisconsin. They're a big-time market. Free agents are going to want to play for the New York Jets eventually if the money is right and the team is good. So you can attract big-time free agents. Not to mention, over the next 3 years, the Jets have 13 draft picks in the first, second, and third round combined. You got 13 draft picks in the first 3 rounds over the next 3 years. You can improve this team with draft capital. And not to mention, expectations are low for you. Expectations are at an all-time low bar. The Jets very well could go 0-16 this year. You mean to tell me that if the Jets don't win 4, 5, or 6 games next year, Trevor Lawrence and that head coach are not going to be praised? I beg to differ. They will be praised tremendously. Brian Flores got a ton of credit for winning 5 games with the Miami Dolphins last year. And that Miami Dolphins team had much more talent than this New York Jets team, okay? If Trevor Lawrence becomes a great quarterback, he easily becomes the biggest star in the New York sports market. A big arm quarterback that was a star at Clemson, he definitely would be a star in the New York market, being a great quarterback for the New York Jets. No doubt about it. It's a big market. He'd get a ton of endorsements. He'd be set for life. He'd be a celebrity. He'd be rich. And he would be a franchise changer. No doubt about it. Even from a revenue perspective. He sell a lot of tickets, and he bring in a lot of money to the city of New York, being the quarterback for the Jets. You know how many tickets Trevor Lawrence is going to sell? Do you know how many jerseys people are going to buy if Trevor Lawrence is a hit? When we look at very famous athletes currently in New York City, you've got Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. Very good players that play for the New York Yankees, but it's baseball, people. America only cares about baseball until the postseason arrives. That's just the harsh reality. If you look at the New York Knicks, who do they have? Obi Toppin. I like Obi Toppin a lot, but I don't think that Obi Toppin can reach the status that Trevor Lawrence can reach if he becomes a hit. Football is more popular in America than basketball. It's just a harsh reality. Is Daniel Jones a big-time star in New York? A lot of people know who he is, but he's kind of boring. He's not very talkative. Saquon Barkley, he's great. He's dynamic. He's a running back, not a quarterback. And for what it's worth, the New York Rangers are cool, but no one cares about hockey. I'm just saying, people. So for all those reasons that I mentioned, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I would personally think twice about passing on the opportunity to be the next franchise quarterback for the New York Jets. So let me shift to this topic right here. Boy, oh boy, has it been a rough year for Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines in 2020. Now, obviously, the big news is Ohio State has canceled their annual game with Michigan. due to Michigan dealing with with the coronavirus as far as their players are concerned. This is the first time that game's been canceled since 1917. Honestly, to keep it $1.50 with you, if Michigan was a top 10 team and they needed this game to get into the playoffs, they would have found a way to make this game happen. But Michigan, they chickened out because they know they're going to get boat raced by Ohio State. We all know Ohio State pretty much owns Michigan at this point. Ohio State has won 15 of the last 16 games versus Michigan. Michigan was going to lose. We know that, okay? But let's talk about Jim Harbaugh. Because as a whole this year, Michigan has been a disappointment. This year, Michigan is a 2-4 football team in regards to their record. And we're in the 6th year of the Jim Harbaugh era in Michigan, and he has yet to beat Ohio State. And listen, I understand this year is the year of COVID. Teams like LSU, teams like even Penn State, Minnesota, Oklahoma have struggled a little bit. Oregron off the slow starts. I get it. It's been a struggle year for some of these teams because of COVID. But I'm sorry, people. Michigan has been a flat-out disappointment. There's no other way to slice it. They've been a disappointment this year. And like I said, we're 6 years in the Jim Harbaugh era in Michigan. We're in year number 6. I'm done with the excuses for Jim Harbaugh. You should not be losing to Michigan State in your 6th year at Michigan. You should not be losing to Indiana. You should not be barely beating Rutgers. And as of right now today, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, and depending on who you ask, maybe Iowa and maybe Northwestern are better programs in the Big Ten than Michigan. That's sad to see because people thought that Jim Harbaugh was going to be brought into Michigan to knock off Ohio State, to win big games, and to allow Michigan to compete for national titles. And he has failed in that regard. Jim Harbaugh's bowl record is 1-4. Jim Harbaugh's record versus Michigan State is 3-3, 500 versus your little brother in state. And his record versus Ohio State is 0-5. And if you combine those records, so if you combine his bowl record, his record versus Michigan State, and his record versus Ohio State, Jim Harbaugh is 4-12. That's not a great record. And Jim Harbaugh clearly is not the guy going for Michigan if Michigan wants to get over the hump and compete with Ohio State and win national titles. And here's the harsh reality about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. See, here's the thing. Michigan thought that Jim Harbaugh was going to be brought in to win them national titles and to take them to the promised land. But unfortunately, I have to say this is the honest truth. The expectations for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan were way too high to begin with. Jim Harbaugh was never going to live up to the Michigan fan base's expectations. And I'll tell you why. What you have to understand about Jim Harbaugh is this. Jim Harbaugh is a good college football head coach. He's good. He's not terrible. He's not awful. He's good. But Jim Harbaugh is not elite. And even before he got to Michigan, he was never an elite college football head coach. See, Michigan fans were so turned on to Jim Harbaugh because they said, oh, look at what Jim Harbaugh did at Stanford. He turned Stanford around. Jim Harbaugh's the answer. He's going to make us a national title contender. And folks, the honest truth was Jim Harbaugh was nothing special at Stanford. He was a good head coach at Stanford, not an elite head coach at Stanford. During the 4 years that Jim Harbaugh was the head coach for Stanford, he won 58% of his games, and he went 1-1 in bowl games. 1 win and 1 loss in his 2 bowl games that he made at Stanford. That's good, but that's not great. That's not elite. Like I mentioned earlier, Harbaugh's a good coach, not a great head coach. He's not Dabo Swinney. He's not Nick Saban. He's not Ryan Day. Heck, you can make the argument He's not even Ed Oregron. You want to know why I'm going to give Ed Oregron a pass right here? I'm going to give Ed Oregron a pass because this guy plays in the SEC, the hardest conference in all college football. I can live with Ed Oregron having a down year every now and then because, well, he plays in the best conference in all of college football. Jim Harbaugh is not capable of reloading every single year and being a national title contender every single year at a Power 5 school. He has not proven that he is capable of doing that. Jim Harbaugh is a good recruiter. He's not a great recruiter, not elite in that category, not better than Kirby Smart, not better than Nick Saban, not better than what Urban Meyer was, and not better than what Ryan Day is right now. Some of that has to do with Ryan Day, being at a program in Ohio State that is just better than Michigan. That's fine, but Harbaugh was brought in to, up the ante a little bit, and he's been a good recruiter. But Michigan has limitations, and Harbaugh's not good enough to overcome those academic limitations, okay? And my question is, why were Michigan fans having the expectations be so high for Jim Harbaugh in the first place? When's the last time Michigan has won a national title? When's the last time a national title has been the standard at Michigan? Michigan might be the most overrated program in all college football right now. Michigan has won 11 national titles. That's very, very good. That's great, okay? You want to know the last time they've actually won one of those 11 national titles? It was in 1997, a long time ago, because right now is 2020. And in that year, 1997, Michigan shared their national title with Nebraska. The last time Michigan, outright, by themselves, won a national title was 1948. And Michigan fans have you thinking that national titles are the standard at our program right now. That's not been the standard for decades. Michigan is the most overrated program in all of college football, and the expectations for Jim Harbaugh were way too high for him to live up to because Michigan, they're not a national title powerhouse anymore. That's not what they've been about the last, 20 to 30 years. And Jim Harbaugh at Stanford was a good head coach, but not a great head coach. Jim Harbaugh, he was never going to be capable of making Michigan a national title contender. And based on the way things are looking for Ryan Day and Ohio State, Ryan Day is not slowing down. Michigan is not even remotely close to Ohio State. Ohio State's won 15 of their last 16 matchups versus Michigan. Jim Harbaugh has come close to beating Ohio State one time back in 2016. Ever since then, he's not been close to competing with Ohio State. So that's the harsh and brutally honest truth about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. The Michigan Wolverines are not the national title powerhouse that the media and that their fan base wants to make them out to be. And Jim Harbaugh is a good football coach. He's going to win you anywhere from 8 to 10 games in most good years. But Jim Harbaugh, he's not going to win you a bunch of bowl games. He's not going to make you a national title contender. He's a good head coach, not an elite head coach. That is the harsh reality about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. And by the way, I don't think Jim Harbaugh is the future of Michigan. He might have bought himself another year due to the fact that this Ohio State game got canceled this year. So we'll see what the future holds for Jim Harbaugh. But I doubt that Jim Harbaugh is going to be the head coach of Michigan within the next 2 seasons. At some point, whether it be at the end of this year or maybe at the end of next year, Jim Harbaugh is probably going to get fired. And that's the right move because Jim Harbaugh, he's been a disappointment at Michigan. Sure, he made Michigan relevant again. But again, if you're barely beating Rutgers and losing to Indiana and losing to Michigan State, who had a first-year head coach who was projected to be not very good, if you're losing to those opponents 6 years in to your tenure at Michigan, you're not cutting it. You're not getting the job done. So that's the harsh reality about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. Okay, let me talk about Ohio State once again. I believe Ohio State is going to win the national title in 2021, this season, because the national title is going to be played in 2021, early January, okay? Basically it's a 2020 national title, but you get the point, all right? But yeah, this year, as I speak today, I believe Ohio State is going to win the national title. I didn't make an entire show dedicated to college football to start the year, where I made a bunch of college football predictions, just because there was so much unknown when it came to college football this year. Who's going to play these amount of games, who's going to play this amount of games, what players are opting out, schedules have been changed, all that great stuff. There was just so much chaos that went on in the offseason in regards to getting the college football season actually started. I didn't want to make an episode, predicting all these things, but I will say, had I made a prediction, had I made a show predicting what was going to happen in college football, Ohio State would have been my pick to win the national title this year, and they're my pick currently right now, okay? Why do I believe Ohio State is going to win the national title? Well, let's start with Justin Fields. Justin Fields is arguably the best player in all college football, not named Trevor Lawrence. He's that good, okay? At least at the quarterback position, okay? And listen, in today's college football world, in order to win a national title, you need good quarterback play. A big reason why Georgia is not in the top 4 right now is because they don't have a good quarterback. Stetson Bennett, he's not good. JT Daniels, he's good. He has potential, but the bottom line is Georgia, they don't have a quarterback. They've got 4 or 5 stars all over their roster, but because they don't have a quarterback, they're not relevant in the college football playoff picture. And listen, I'm going to list you off the quarterbacks that have won national titles over the past 4 seasons. Deshaun Watson won Clemson a national title. Tua Tagovailoa won Alabama a national title. Trevor Lawrence won Clemson a national title. And Joe Burrow won the LSU Tigers a national title last season. Do you notice a trend right there? Those are Heisman Trophy contenders, and those are legitimate NFL starting quarterbacks that have gone on to win national titles. So you gotta have a good quarterback. Justin Fields is that guy. He's very, very good. He very well could be a top 5 pick this year. Yeah, so you got the quarterback figured out. The wide receiver core for Ohio State is very, very good. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, they're 2 of the best wide receivers in all college football. Even a guy like Julian Fleming, who's very, very good on Ohio State's roster, has not even gotten significant playing time up to this point, but I won't be shocked to be seeing some more Julian Fleming as the season progresses, as he gets more comfortable with the scheme and with the playbook. And Jeremy Rucker's a pretty good tight end, okay? And Ohio State also can run the football very effectively. So not only do they have a very dynamic passing attack led by Justin Fields and those good weapons, they've also got the ability to run the football effectively with their very good offensive line. They've got very good players up front on the offensive line, and they recently just rushed for 346 yards versus Michigan State. Trey Sermon's a pretty good running back. Master Teague's pretty good. And not to mention, Justin Fields running the football, he's very, very effective, okay? And the Ohio State defense is pretty good in my opinion as well. Now, it's not an elite group, but it's a solid group. They're definitely missing Chase Young from last year. They're definitely missing Jeffrey Okudah from last year, but this is a defense that's still full of 4- and 5-star recruits. Shaun Wade's a very good cornerback. He might very well be a first-round pick this year. Zach Harrison's a very good edge rusher who's starting to really come into his own. Now, this secondary overall is very, very suspect. They did struggle versus Indiana a couple of weeks ago, but in that Indiana game, Ohio State at one point was up 35-7. And Indiana is a top 15 team this year. And I understand Ohio State has not played great opponents this year outside of Indiana, but I truly believe Ohio State struggling to beat Indiana actually is going to help them down the stretch, because it showed Ohio State, hey, listen, we're a good team, but we're not a great team quite yet. Ryan Day and that coaching staff are going to emphasize to Justin Fields, hey, you need to be better. They're going to emphasize to that defense, that secondary, hey, you need to be better. So I think that was really just a wake-up call for Ohio State. And by the way, during the process of them not playing their best game, they still beat a very good Indiana team, in my opinion, okay? And when we look at the college football landscape, I truly believe among the contending teams, this race is wide open for who's going to win the national title. Alabama, they're very good. They're probably, maybe, the most talented team on paper, but we've seen some Nick Saban teams in the past struggle with mobile quarterback. Who's a mobile quarterback? Justin Fields. And we've seen Johnny Manziel and Deshaun Watson give Nick Saban some trouble in the past. I'm not saying Justin Fields is as good as a Deshaun Watson. He's definitely better than Johnny Manziel. But, Justin Fields, he definitely has the opportunity to exploit the Alabama defense. And by the way, when we saw Alabama face off against Georgia, Georgia had some open wide receivers. They moved the football effectively versus Alabama. The only problem was they had Stetson Bennett throwing them wide receivers the football. And Stetson Bennett is garbage. He's no good. He's trash. He's just not a good starting quarterback, okay? So, listen, I think Justin Fields can definitely handle that Alabama defense. You look at Clemson. Clemson struggled to beat Boston College, people. They also lost to Notre Dame on the road. And listen, you could talk about, Trevor Lawrence didn't play in that game. Listen, the Clemson offense was not the problem for them in that matchup. The quarterback position was not the issue. The issue was their defense. So Clemson, while talented, they're vulnerable. We look at Notre Dame, sure they're undefeated, but do they have the 4 and 5 star players that Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia has? Not so sure. I think eventually Notre Dame could run out of gas. And you look at Ohio State, the question is their secondary, obviously. But I still believe Ohio State can win the national title this year for this final reason. I believe in head coach Ryan Day. Ryan Day is, in my opinion, one of the better head coaches in all of college football. And I understand he inherited a very good roster at Ohio State. Urban Meyer definitely left him in good hands. But we can't ignore the fact that Ryan Day is 21-1 in his career as a head coach at Ohio State. And last year, in the only game that Ryan Day has ever lost in his career at Ohio State, Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes fell to the Clemson Tigers in the college football semifinals. And in that game, Ohio State did not lose because of lack of talent. They lost in that game because they were out-coached and Ohio State did not execute better than Clemson down the stretch. I think that was a learning experience for Ryan Day and the Ohio State coaching staff. And I believe Ryan Day, Justin Fields, and the key players that are still on Ohio State's roster that went through that heartbreaking loss last year, they have learned from that moment, in my opinion. And I think they're going to transfer that to the playoffs this year because Ohio State, they're going to be in the playoffs, in my opinion, because the Big Ten just changed the rules to allow Ohio State to compete for a Big Ten title. They'll be facing Northwestern in the Big Ten title game. They'll beat Northwestern. Northwestern's a good team, but not a great team. They just lost to Michigan State, the same team that Ohio State just dominated the other day. So I believe Ohio State has all the ingredients and they have all the pieces to win a national title this year. And I believe the Ohio State Buckeyes, led by Justin Fields and Ryan Day, will win the national title in 2021. I want to now shift to the LSU Tigers. I believe that Ed Oregron and the LSU Tigers are an elite college football program. I consider LSU to be a tier 1 college football program, Ed Oregron is not quite on the level of Dabo Swinney, or Nick Saban, even a guy like Lincoln Riley, but Ed Oregron's a pretty darn good head coach. And outside of Alabama, Clemson, and maybe Ohio State, I cannot name many programs better than LSU in regards to football. College football programs, it goes Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, that's it. That's your tier 1 programs. If you want to throw in Oklahoma, go ahead, but I'm not putting Oklahoma ahead of LSU just because they don't play big boy football. It's a soft pillow fighting conference in the Big 12. Oklahoma's not a physical team, and anytime they run up against Alabama, a Clemson, or an LSU, or an Ohio State, they get bodied. They get pushed around. They're not in that category, in my opinion, okay? And I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, Jamon, what are you talking about? LSU this year's 3-5. They've lost to Mississippi State. They've lost to Missouri. Alabama beat them 55-17. How is LSU an elite program? Well, I'll tell you why. And first of all, before I get into the reasons why, keep in mind, Ed Oregron is not the only head coach in college football right now that is struggling. PJ Fleck, one of the better young head coaches in all college football. He's won 58% of his games. He's struggling. Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma, the last 3 years, he's won 12 games. His team got off to a slow start. Jim Harbaugh, he's won 64% of his career games. He's struggling this year. James Franklin, he's won 65% of his regular season games in his career. He's struggling this year. Mario Cristobal has won 72% of his games at Oregon. He's struggling this year. They're not even ranked. Folks, it's okay for a coach to have one bad season. If you've been great and you've delivered national titles and you've shown excellence over time, I'm going to give you a pass in a year of COVID. Okay, I'm just going to do that. That's what I'm going to do, because I'm a guy that is looking at things from a realistic perspective. Am I supposed to think that Ed Oregron just can't coach because he's having one bad year in a year where LSU lost 14 draft picks to the NFL? Folks, Ed Oregron in 5 years at LSU has won 75% of his games. He's gone 4-1 in bowl games. He's won a national title. Last year's LSU team was arguably the best college football team of all time. They were 15-0. They beat a lot of great opponents, and they had a lot of great players as well. Maybe outside the Miami Hurricanes from 2001, you can make the argument that last year's LSU team in 2019 was the best team in college football history. And Ed Oregron was the guy that was the conductor of that ship. And by the way, you talk about, well, Ed Oregron had 14 draft picks. He was carried. Who recruited those draft picks? Who developed those draft picks? Who brought in Joe Burrow? Who brought in Joe Brady to help out his offense? That guy was Ed Oregron. And by the way, LSU has a standard of putting players in the National Football League. They got the third most players drafted since 2000, okay? If I'm a highly sought-after recruit and I want to go play in the NFL and I want to compete for national titles, I don't know how LSU doesn't come up on my list pretty much automatically. It's right up there with Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. It's right there. You can get a great education at LSU. You can compete for national titles. You can win bowl games. And by the way, give Ed Oregron some credit in this regard. Ed Oregron does not get enough credit for making adjustments this past season. Ed Oregron realized, hey, I can't win the SEC just running the football down people's throat and playing great defense. I need to run a spread offense. I need to get Jamar Chase involved. I need to get Justin Jefferson involved. I need to get a real quarterback that can actually throw the ball down the field. I need to bring in an offensive coordinator that will incorporate some NFL concepts. And I need to start throwing the football down the field more consistently and be more explosive on offense. Because if I can't do that, I'm not going to beat the Trevor Lawrences, the Justin Fields, or the Tua Tagovailoas of the world. LSU totally changed their entire offense last season. And guess what? It won them a national title. Ed Oregron, he's one of the best head coaches in all of college football. 2020 is just one bump in the road. LSU is going to reboot. They're going to be much improved next year. They're going to continue to put players in the NFL. They're going to win bowl games. They're going to compete for national titles. This is not the beginning of the end for Ed Oregron. He's got a great future ahead of him at LSU. If you want to sell your stock on Ed Oregron, hey, fine. Go ahead and do it. I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to hold on to my Ed Oregron stock, and I'm going to watch LSU reboot next year and continue to prove why they're an elite program and why you should not be disrespecting them. LSU is a great program. Ed Oregron's a great head coach. That's where I land on the LSU Tigers. They're definitely a top-tier program for all the reasons that I mentioned. I now want to talk about Zach Wilson, the BYU starting quarterback. So Zach Wilson's an NFL prospect, apparently. A lot of people think that he's going to go in the first round this year. It's definitely possible. And listen, before I get into the nooks and crannies of how I feel about Zach Wilson as a prospect, I'm pretty confident in saying that I have a good gauge that Zach Wilson is going to be a first round pick. Whether you think he's worth a first round pick or not, I'm confident that he will be selected in the first round of the 2021 NFL draft. And why do I say that? Well, I say that because there's a lot of quarterback needy teams. Teams like the Jets, teams like the Jaguars. I think the Detroit Lions could use a successor to Matthew Stafford. Same thing with the Falcons. They could use a successor to Matt Ryan. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is the future of the 49ers. You look at Chicago, Trubisky, Nick Foles, it's not working. You look at the New England Patriots. What if they move on from Cam Newton? They're going to need a good young quarterback, right? The Denver Broncos, Drew Lock, he's not looked good this year. The Denver Broncos could be in the market for a quarterback. The Carolina Panthers, they could be looking for Teddy Bridgewater's successor. Washington, Alex Smith is fine. Dwayne Haskins, I believe in him, but does the coaching staff believe in him? I'm not sure. So Washington could be in the market for a quarterback. The Colts, I like Jacob Eason, but it's not obvious that Jacob Eason's a franchise quarterback. We shall see. They could look to move on from Philip Rivers. So there's a lot of quarterback needy teams in the 2021 NFL draft. And for what it's worth, Zach Wilson has put some good things on tape. There is things to like about Zach Wilson as a prospect. However, let me state my position on Zach Wilson. I'm not sold on Zach Wilson, and I don't believe Zach Wilson is worth trading up for. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by I'm not sold on Zach Wilson? Me saying that does not imply that I think Zach Wilson is a terrible quarterback. Zach Wilson definitely can make it as a starting quarterback in the National Football League if he gets the right support around him and if he pans out. It's not crazy to think that. However, when I'm drafting a quarterback, especially in the first round, I'm looking for a franchise quarterback to be the guy long term. The next 10 to 15 years, I want that quarterback to be my guy. If that's not the case, if I don't identify anyone being worth that pick at the spot in which I'm at, I'm not drafting that quarterback because you can get a good starting quarterback somewhere. You could do that in free agency. Teddy Bridgewater, he's a starting quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is a starting quarterback. Those guys are not franchise quarterbacks. And I think that Zach Wilson is going to fall into that Jimmy Garoppolo and into that Teddy Bridgewater mode. He definitely has more potential than Teddy Bridgewater. And I honestly think that he might have more potential than Jimmy Garoppolo. He can become a good starting quarterback. But a franchise-changing quarterback, I'm not so sure. I'll tell you why. When I watch Zach Wilson, nothing jumps off my screen. Nothing. And keep in mind, I've watched Zach Wilson on my TV screen, and I've actually watched the guy play live. I got a chance to watch Zach Wilson last year play against my college, the University of Toledo, in Toledo, Ohio, in the Glass Bowl. And not one time did I think Zach Wilson was an NFL quarterback. He made some good throws. He didn't play awful. He did throw a bad interception, but I saw the guy play live, and I thought he was an average Joe. I just didn't see anything special about Zach Wilson, He makes good decisions for the most part, but I think that Zach Wilson at times tries to play way too much hero ball. There is some recklessness to his game now. He's not as reckless as a Jameis Winston or a Sam Darnold, but there's some bad habits that he needs to break, and I look at his arm, and his arm's just okay. His deep ball at times will flutter downfield. He underthrows his deep balls a lot. When he connects on his deep balls, it's beautiful, it's pretty. But there are certain throws that Zach Wilson just cannot make. He's a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback. Not a great quarterback prospect. And there are some things that he will be limited to at the NFL level, in my opinion. There are some things that he is just not physically capable of doing. He's a good athlete, not a great athlete. I see him escaping from these, defenders, but they're not Ohio State guys, they're not Alabama guys, and they're not Clemson guys, okay? He's a good athlete, not a great athlete. He can buy some time. He can maneuver the pocket. He's got good pocket presence. He can escape some pressure when needed, but I don't know. It's just one of those things where I think he looks like he's a great athlete at the college level, but when he goes against those faster defensive ends and faster linebackers, I think that Zach Wilson might meet reality in the NFL. And also a thing that I don't like about Zach Wilson is he struggles to get to his second, third, and fourth reads. And when he does do that, he tries to play hero ball. I don't like that. I want a guy that's patient, that will sit in the pocket, that will make good decisions, that will scan the field, and a guy that doesn't really have happy feet. And listen, I'm going to continue to evaluate Zach Wilson. I'm still in the process of watching some of his games. I've not watched every single BYU game this year, but in the amount of games that I have watched, I just haven't seen a dynamic thrower of the football. And again, if you want to draft Zach Wilson, that's fine. He's not my cup of tea. He might be Washington's cup of tea. He might be the 49ers' cup of tea. He might be the Bears' cup of tea. That's fine. And listen, if Zach Wilson goes to a very good roster, he can win you a lot of games in the National Football League. We've seen Jimmy Garoppolo get to a Super Bowl. We've seen Nick Foles get to a Super Bowl. So listen, it's not impossible that Zach Wilson could make it in the NFL. I just see a guy with a very high floor and not a high ceiling, and that is not my cup of tea, okay? Zach Wilson could one day become the best quarterback out of this draft class. A lot of things could, factor into that. Maybe Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence go to dysfunctional teams. They're not supported. And Zach Wilson goes to a good team in which he's supported. Listen, it's all about fit in the NFL. And honestly, it's all about where do you land, in my opinion. It's really, you can say it's about your talent, but in reality, a lot of quarterbacks are very talented. It's all about getting in the right situation and being put in a great position to succeed. And I could see a situation where Zach Wilson proves me wrong and develops into a franchise quarterback one day. I could very well see that. But based on what I've seen so far, he's not my cup of tea. And I'm not sure if I'm willing to spend a top 10 pick on Zach Wilson. So that's where I land on Zach Wilson. Again, not a terrible quarterback. But again, not quite my cup of tea. And that is how I feel about Zach Wilson as an NFL prospect, at least as I speak today. I want to now transition to Kedon Slovis, the starting quarterback for the USC Trojans. And Kedon Slovis, if you don't know who he is, he's a starting quarterback, obviously, for the University of Southern California, a.k.a. USC. And he's currently a true sophomore, and he's only 19 years old. But despite being only 19 years old, and despite being only a true sophomore, I believe in Kedon Slovis. I really do. I think Kedon Slovis has a lot of potential to become a franchise quarterback one day. And I know that some people are going to write Kedon Slovis off by saying he's a USC quarterback. USC quarterbacks never worked. When in reality, Carson Palmer actually had a pretty good career. And here's the thing, people. I don't really care about what school a prospect goes to. I just evaluate the prospect. If you want to go ahead and say USC quarterbacks are trash or Alabama quarterbacks are trash, that's fine. Go ahead, do you. I'm not going to do that, okay? And listen, for what it's worth, in my opinion, Kedon Slovis, and actually not even my opinion, anyone that actually watched these guys closely at USC, I don't think it's up for debate. Kedon Slovis already is a better prospect than what Sam Darnold was when he was at USC. Sam Darnold was one of the most overrated prospects of all time, in my opinion. He's not been a great quarterback in the NFL. I understand that he's not been put in a great position to succeed, but I didn't believe in Sam Darnold, and so far, he hasn't done much in the NFL. I think that one day he could become an okay starting quarterback, but that's just my opinion, But let's just focus in on Kedon Slovis. I'm actually going to say something that might surprise all of you. When I watch Kedon Slovis play the quarterback position, he reminds me of Joe Burrow. He really does. Now, am I saying he's going to be better than Joe Burrow? Am I saying that he was on Joe Burrow's level as a prospect? No. Joe Burrow, in my opinion, had the greatest college football season of all time for a quarterback this past year. He was that good. He was that deadly at LSU. He won a national title. He won the Heisman. Kedon Slovis, not quite playing at that level. But Kedon Slovis has a very similar skill set to one Joe Burrow. And if you've been watching Joe Burrow in the NFL, you know that Joe Burrow is a pretty good quarterback. He's definitely a quarterback that you can win a Super Bowl with down the road if you put the requisite parts around him, at least in my opinion, okay? But listen, man, Kedon Slovis, what makes him so good is he's a great decision maker. And he goes through his first, second, and third reads very, very well. And that's very rare to see from a true sophomore that's only 19 years old. This guy is mature upon his years, okay? And that was Joe Burrow's greatest strength, in my opinion, at LSU. His ability to make great decisions and to scan the field and just dot people up, okay? He was a surgeon at LSU, and that's kind of why I see from Kedon Slovis. Also, the guy is very, very accurate. He's hitting his wide receivers in stride. His ball placement is very, very good on all three levels of the field. And listen, Kedon Slovis doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but his arm strength is definitely good enough to make it in the NFL. He's definitely got a good enough NFL arm to make all the requisite throws. He's got enough arm strength in that regard. And listen, Joe Burrow didn't have the greatest arm when he was coming out of LSU. He's working fine in the NFL. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, the two all-time leaders in touchdown passes in NFL history as we speak today. Were their arms ever the greatest thing in the world? No, Tom Brady and Drew Brees' arm is good to sort of average. So listen, you don't need to have a rocket arm to succeed at the next level. You need to be able to read defenses, anticipate, and throw with accuracy. That's some of the biggest things that you need to do at the next level. And Kedon Slovis, he checks off those boxes. And also, Kedon Slovis doesn't get enough credit for how mobile he is. Okay, now Kedon Slovis isn't going to be a quarterback that rushes for a bunch of yards, but he knows how to buy time in the pocket. He's very good at escaping pressure. He's very good at keeping his eyes down the field, and he can run for your occasional first down when need be. He has the mobility to make off-platform throws, and that's so key in today's NFL because you look at the Aaron Rodgers of the world, the Russell Wilsons of the world. You look at the Patrick Mahomes of the world. You look at the Deshaun Watsons, the Kyler Murrays of the world. These guys are able to extend plays with their legs, keep their eyes down the field, and throw the ball off platform and with a messy pocket. Unless you have a cannon for an arm or you're deadly accurate, there's not very many spots for you if you're just a drop back, pocket passer. And Kedon Slovis, he's definitely a guy that's mobile enough to, move the pocket, run some bootlegs, run some read options occasionally. He's a good enough athlete to do those things. Your playbook is wide open with Kedon Slovis. And listen, I think that Kedon Slovis playing for the University of Southern California long term is really going to help him at the next level in the NFL. The reason why I say that is because this USC roster is pretty average. He bails them out a lot. And he's had to deal with a lot of messy pockets. He's had to deal with wide receivers dropping passes. He's had to overcome a lot of adversity in college. Kedon Slovis is getting a little taste of what the NFL is like. Because in the NFL, you have to deal with a lot of messy pockets. If you're a top 5 or top 10 pick, you're probably going to a bad team with a bad roster. And early on, you are probably going to have to elevate the troops around you. I think Kedon Slovis is learning the hard way in college right now, and that will make his transition to the NFL a lot easier. So that is how I feel about current USC starting quarterback Kedon Slovis. He's obviously not going to be coming out this year, but he probably will be coming out next year. He definitely has a chance to be a great franchise quarterback one day. And listen, he's already pretty polished for being a 19-year-old true sophomore. Him coming back next year to really fine-tune his skills once and for all in his final third season, probably at USC, that's going to definitely benefit him at the next level. So I think Kedon Slovis is a very good quarterback. He's definitely, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the Pac-12 right now. And he definitely, in my opinion, has a chance of a bright future at the NFL level once his name is called in the NFL draft at some point in the near future. I now want to shift to Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart is a pretty good head coach in my opinion. You know, for what it's worth, he's been at Georgia for 5 years. He's got a 50-14 record in his career at Georgia. That's pretty good for a 5-year stretch. And in 2017, he got the University of Georgia to the national title game, in which they fell to the University of Alabama. But I'm going to be the guy that spoils the party right here. I do not believe Kirby Smart is the right head coach to win national titles at the University of Georgia. 5 years in, I've seen all I need to know. He's not the guy. There are 3 reasons as to why I believe this. Reason number 1, I believe Kirby Smart is too stubborn. Reason number 2, Kirby Smart up to this point has failed to show that he can get the most out of a quarterback, and he has also shown that he cannot properly evaluate the quarterback position. And last but not least, my third and final point, he can't beat Alabama. He's not the right guy to beat Alabama. And in order to win a national title, and in order to win the SEC each year, you have to be able to knock off Alabama. Kirby Smart, he doesn't check any of those boxes. So, in my opinion, eventually, his time at Georgia is going to be up in the next probably 2 to 3 seasons. I think Georgia will eventually realize the writing's on the wall, and I don't see Kirby Smart bringing the University of Georgia a national title anytime soon unless he changes his ways. If Kirby Smart changes his ways, fine. But to this point, he's shown that he's stubborn and that he's not going to change, and I'm going to bank on that being the case long term. So let's talk about it, okay? The problem with the University of Georgia right now is their offense. And Kirby Smart is to blame, in my opinion. He's way too busy trying to run a 1980s and 1990s offense. He's way too busy trying to run the football effectively, and he's trying to win national titles the way that Nick Saban won national titles early in his career. Playing great defense, running the football, and having a game-managing quarterback that doesn't make mistakes. And for a while, that worked. But folks, we're in a new day and age in college football. In order to win a national title, you need to be able to score points in bunches these days. Because the quarterbacks that are winning national titles these days are Tua Tagovailoa, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and Joe Burrow. And Georgia, their style of play does not match up with some of the upper teams in all college football. It doesn't match up with Ohio State, with Clemson, with Alabama. They don't match up. Nick Saban 5 years ago realized, if I want to continue to compete for and win national titles, I need to make adjustments. I need to stop running the football so much. I need to spread people out. I need to use Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith effectively, and I need to get better play at the quarterback position. So I'm going to go out and recruit a Jalen Hurts. I'm going to go out and recruit a Tua Tagovailoa and a Mac Jones. And I'm going to bring in coordinators that are going to help me get the most out of these 4 and 5 star wide receivers, and we're going to throw the football down the field more effectively. Folks, Ed Oregron at LSU is doing the same thing. He realized, I cannot win a national title just running the football and playing great defense. I need to get with these NFL concepts. I need to get me a quarterback that can move the chains and push the ball down the field and make plays. And guess what? Oh, what do you know? Ed Oregron, he wins the national title last year. And by the way, the University of Georgia has the talent to do what Nick Saban and Ed Oregron have done. They've got 4 or 5 star wide receivers all over the place. Those 4 or 5 star wide receivers might not be AJ Green, but they're pretty darn good. George Pickens, have you seen him? He's pretty good. And the other problem with Kirby Smart is he's failed to identify what great quarterback play is. Because Once a long time ago, Justin Fields was on the University of Georgia's roster. Once a long time ago, Jacob Eason was on the University of Georgia's roster. This guy, Kirby Smart, chose Stetson Bennett over JT Daniels. He's only playing JT Daniels right now because he's being forced to play JT Daniels. You know, and I think that Kirby Smart is going to roll with JT Daniels the rest of the way this season. But if anyone watched JT Daniels his freshman year at USC and they came away from that season thinking JT Daniels is not better than Stetson Bennett, they're just blind and they don't know football. Kirby Smart should not have rolled out Stetson Bennett as a starting quarterback this year. And I get it. Jamie Newman opted out. You know, you were unsure about JT Daniels, but it's not hard, Kirby. Everyone with a brain and with a very healthy set of eyeballs knows that JT Daniels is better than Stetson Bennett. And everyone knows you made the wrong decision choosing Jake Fromm over Justin Fields and Jacob Eason. Jacob Eason very well could be the Colts starting quarterback next year, and Justin Fields, he could be a top 5 draft pick this year. And Kirby Smart failed to properly develop Justin Fields at Georgia. And by the way, honestly, if Kirby Smart wanted to roll with Jake Fromm for one more year at Georgia and let Justin Fields develop properly, that's fine. But you at least need to allow Justin Fields to be a quarterback that develops properly in your system. You can't just be rolling out Justin Fields in certain situations and just making him run read options and stuff like that. No, Justin Fields, he's trying to get to the NFL. You must properly develop Justin Fields and keep the guy happy. Justin Fields is from Georgia. He wanted to be the University of Georgia starting quarterback. But you want to know why he left? He left because he realized, I'm not being properly developed in Georgia. I need to leave because this system is not going to get me to the NFL level. He realized Ryan Day's system was going to allow him to do so. So, again, that's how I feel about Kirby Smart in that regard. And listen, it's pretty much been proven up to this point, Kirby Smart can't beat Alabama. He's 0-3 in his career versus Alabama. Multiple times, Georgia has had double-digit leads versus Alabama, but because they got out-coached, they lost the game and let it slip away. Kirby Smart has not proven that he can out-coach Nick Saban despite having just as good of players as Nick Saban. Georgia's got 4 and 5-star players all over their roster. I don't want to hear the excuses. The talent level is pretty even in regards to Alabama and Georgia, based on recruiting and based on the eye test. Georgia has more than enough good players to knock off Alabama, and over the past 5 years, Kirby Smart has failed to do so. And right now, today, Georgia's not even better than Florida. They got blown out 44-28 to Florida this year. 5 years in, Kirby Smart is not better than Texas A&M right now today, and he's not better than Florida right now today, okay? You could argue that Georgia might be a better program than Florida and Texas A&M right now, but right now, as we speak today, Texas A&M and Florida are having better seasons than the University of Georgia. And by the way, a big reason why Florida is going to the SEC title game and not Georgia is because they're running an NFL-style offense. Kyle Trask, they're spreading the ball out. They're letting them throw the ball down the field. Georgia has failed to do so. In my opinion, Kirby Smart is way too stubborn. In my opinion, right now, Kirby Smart is the Jim Harbaugh of the SEC. And right now, I don't think Kirby Smart is capable of winning the University of Georgia a national title. He's a good head coach. Georgia's going to win games. They're going to go to New Year's Six Bowls, but they will never get over the top as long as Kirby Smart is stubborn and not willing to adjust as a college football head coach. Georgia has reached their peak with Kirby Smart as their head coach, in my opinion. I now want to shift to Brian Kelly and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame is having a very good season in 2020. Right now, they're 10-0. They're heading to the ACC title game to face Clemson once again. Are they going to win that game? Maybe. Maybe not. We shall see. But they're having a great season. Right now, they're one of the top 4 teams in all college football at the moment. They're ranked number 2 at the moment right now. And a couple of weeks ago, they knocked off Clemson without Trevor Lawrence. And listen, DJ Uiagalelei, I got it right. I got it right. DJ Uiagalelei, yes, I like to say that, okay? DJ Uiagalelei, he played pretty good in that game. So I don't want to hear Clemson fans say, oh, we didn't have Trevor Lawrence. If Trevor Lawrence played, we would have won. I'm not so sure because DJ played a very good game, versus Notre Dame. So that's all I want to say about Notre Dame. And I think that they definitely earned that victory versus Clemson. Clemson's biggest issues in that game was their defense, not quarterback play. So sorry, Clemson fan, talk to the hand right there. But I just want to say I have a lot of respect for Brian Kelly, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish's head football coach right now. Brian Kelly has done a great job during his 11 years at the University of Notre Dame. The fact that Brian Kelly has won 73% of his games at Notre Dame is very impressive. He's got a winning record in bowl games, and in the past, he's gotten Notre Dame to a national title. And listen, Notre Dame puts Brian Kelly at a disadvantage every single year. And by the way, it's no one's fault. It's just due to the fact that Notre Dame is such a highly academic school that it's hard to get the 4- and 5-star players to come play for you because not every single student athlete is capable of getting into Notre Dame because it's a very challenging academic school. So listen, Brian Kelly is not consistently getting the 4- and 5-star players that Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Urban Meyer have and were getting, at the respective schools, okay? What Brian Kelly has done is he has established a great culture at the University of Notre Dame, and he's been able to properly develop his players. He deserves a lot of credit for that. And listen, Notre Dame puts players in the NFL. So he's getting players drafted as well to play on Sundays. That's something that should not be overlooked. And I also admire the fact that Notre Dame is not afraid to schedule tough opponents. They'll play a Florida State, back when Florida State was actually good, okay? They'll play a Clemson. They'll play a, University of Southern California. They'll play some good teams. Now, obviously, Notre Dame sort of has been at an advantage because they're a team that doesn't belong to a conference. They're obviously joining the ACC this year, but the bottom line is if you want to schedule tough opponents, you can schedule tough opponents. There are teams that want to play Nick Saban. Nick Saban dodges them. So I got to respect Brian Kelly in that regard. The guy does not get enough credit for how much success he has sustained at Notre Dame, okay? When it comes to Brian Kelly, he's going to probably develop his players. He's going to put players in the NFL. He's going to win you anywhere from 9 to 11 games during most good seasons. And for what it's worth, 11 years into his coaching career at Notre Dame, he's only had one season in which he's been below 500 as a head coach. Now, is Notre Dame going to win a national title this year? Probably not, because they just don't have the 4- and 5-star players that Ohio State and Alabama has. They'll eventually probably run out of gas, but that's not going to take away anything from Brian Kelly, in my opinion. I think Brian Kelly is an excellent head coach. He definitely deserves your respect. And, yeah, I think Brian Kelly does not get enough credit for the culture that he's established at Notre Dame. And Brian Kelly does not get enough credit for the sustained success that he's had as the head football coach at the University of Notre Dame. He's done a good job, no doubt about it. I want to now talk about Tom Herman and the University of Texas. In my opinion, I think Tom Herman has been a disappointment as a head coach during his first 4 years at the University of Texas. Now, to be very clear, I might be being a little bit too harsh in regards to evaluating Tom Herman's time at the University of Texas. I will admit that. I'm a tough grader, but I think that he's been a disappointment. And by the way, my opinion does not imply that Tom Herman is a terrible head coach. Tom Herman is a darn good football coach, in my opinion. But we're in a results-oriented business, people. And Texas, in my opinion, they're not winning enough big games. They're just not. And yes, I understand Tom Herman has a career 31-18 record at the University of Texas. I understand that he is 3-0 in bowl games. I totally get it. I understand it. And if you think Tom Herman has done a good job at Texas, fine. I'm not saying Tom Herman has done a bad job at Texas. I just think that his time at Texas has been underwhelming for one reason and one reason only. Tom Herman has not brought Texas back to the national title picture. He just hasn't. They've not been competing for playoff spots. They haven't been winning big games. They just haven't. And he's still not close to Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma continue to dominate the Big 12. Heck, right now, Iowa State is ranked higher than Texas. There should not be a world in any situation most years where Iowa State is better than Texas. That just should not happen in my opinion. And I know I crushed Jim Harbaugh earlier, but when it comes to Jim Harbaugh's struggles, I have a little bit of sympathy for Jim Harbaugh because I understand the degree of difficulty of Jim Harbaugh's job. Jim Harbaugh is playing, and his team plays in the Big Ten Conference, the second best conference outside of the SEC. Tom Herman, you coach in the pillow-fighting Big 12, where they don't play a lot of big boy football. Michigan is also a very academically challenged school. And while you could say the same thing about Texas, it's not on Michigan's level as far as academics, in my opinion. That's a proven fact. Go look at the academic statistics in regards to Michigan and Texas. Not close, not arguable. And see, Tom Herman, his team plays in Texas, where there's sunny weather. He plays in the Big 12, and he's right in the heart of where all the great football players are. And guess what? Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, they're stealing his recruits. He's right in the heart in the state of Texas. Every single great Texas player should be going to the University of Texas because Tom Herman, he's right there. They're right in his neighborhood. You should be competing for the college football playoffs by year number 4 at the University of Texas. You've got A-plus facilities. It's great weather. It's a blue collar university that's well known throughout college football. You have all the things necessary to be successful. You've recruited very well, but the results don't match that. Tom Herman was brought in to bring Texas back to the national title picture, and so far, he's failed to do so. And with one of his better rosters at the University of Texas, he is disappointed this year. So, in reality, people, listen. Can Tom Herman eventually win Texas a national title? Maybe. That is not out of the possibility. He's a very good football coach. But that does not mean I cannot call Tom Herman out for being a disappointment up to this point. As of right now, it might be harsh, but I think Tom Herman has disappointed up to this point as being the University of Texas head football coach. And until Tom Herman brings Texas back to the college football playoffs, and until he has them competing consistently for national titles, I think that he is selling the University of Texas short. That might be harsh, but that is how I feel, and that is why I believe, as I speak today, in regards to Tom Herman and the University of Texas. I want to now shift to Luke Fickell and the Cincinnati Bearcats. I have tremendous respect for the University of Cincinnati's head football coach, Luke Fickell. In my opinion, Luke Fickell is easily one of the best head coaches in all of college football. And he has quickly turned around the University of Cincinnati. He's completely turned that program around, okay? His first year in Cincinnati was kind of choppy, The team was 4-8. They weren't very good, but I can forgive that just because, you're establishing your culture. You're trying to, get the program to where you want it to be. But the last 3 years, Luke Fickell has really, really gotten Cincinnati moving in the right direction. In 2018, they won 11 games. 2019, they won 11 games. And this year, the team is 8-0. And depending on how the committee feels, they have a chance to make the college football playoffs. They're a top 10 team in the nation right now. And listen, Luke Fickell is doing this with not a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys. A lot of the guys that are big-time recruits in Ohio, they tend to go to the Ohio State University to go compete for national titles. So Luke Fickell, he's in an uphill battle, but he continues to make things work, and he continues to win a bunch of games, okay? The thing that Luke Fickell does best, in my opinion, is he goes out and finds guys that fits his system and he coaches them up. Okay. And by the way, Luke Fickell's not an awful recruiter. I don't want to come across as the guy saying that he can't recruit. It's just that he cannot physically out recruit the Ohio State University because, well, the University of Cincinnati has some limitations in that regard. He may never out recruit Ohio State. And that's okay because you probably should not be out recruiting the Ohio State University as the University of Cincinnati. That's not the expectations, nor should it ever be the expectations, okay? But he's been able to recruit fairly well. But what Luke Fickell does is he brings in guys that fits his culture, that fits his program, and he coaches those guys up, and he gets the most out of his players, man. I want to go back to last college football season. The University of Cincinnati had a big game versus the University of Central Florida, UCF. They were a ranked opponent at the time. They were traveling on the road to face the University of Cincinnati, and the University of Cincinnati beat them. They really did. That was a great game last year. I watched that game from start to finish. The atmosphere in Cincinnati was great. The crowd was rocking. And that's probably the biggest win of Luke Fickell's career at the University of Cincinnati because it told me this program has officially arrived, but in a new way. They're now one of the 10 to 15 best programs in all college football, in my opinion, right now. Okay? It was proven on the field versus UCF, a very good opponent. Keep in mind, UCF has had a lot of great success over the past 3 to 5 seasons. It wasn't too long ago that UCF had won 25 straight games. But that was the first ranked win that Cincinnati got as a program in the last decade. And Luke Fickell deserves a ton of credit for having his guys ready to play and getting that big-time victory. I think Cincinnati is definitely a program that's really, really on the rise. Are they going to make the college football playoffs this year? Maybe, maybe not. I think that they are definitely in contention for it. And I want to say this. If Alabama wins out, if Clemson wins out, if Ohio State wins out, and Notre Dame loses, and a team like Florida or Texas A&M loses down the stretch, the College Football Committee should put the University of Cincinnati in the playoffs. In my opinion, if they continue to win out, I think they would have earned it. They're undefeated. They can only play the teams that are in front of them. They are having an amazing year. They definitely deserve to be there if those circumstances, come into fruition. And I think the College Football Playoff Committee should kind of swallow their pride and just say, hey, Cincinnati deserves it. Let's put them in, okay? Because they're having a good year. I think that if those circumstances were to unfold, they are a worthy fourth team. And listen, we could talk about, Cincinnati doesn't have the players to compete. Listen, Clemson a couple of years ago in 2017 got blown out by Alabama. Michigan State got blown out by Alabama a couple of years ago as well. Ohio State's gotten blown out in the playoffs as well. Washington's gotten blown out, There's a lot of teams that have gotten blown out in the playoffs, Oklahoma too included. So I don't want to hear that, they're going to get blown out because even the big-time schools you put in get blown out from time to time. So, again, that's how I feel about the University of Cincinnati. Not saying they should get in the playoffs right now, but I think that eventually down the road, if some of those things were to unfold that I mentioned, you at least need to consider them. But either way, bottom line, I love what Luke Fickell is doing right now. He's definitely putting together a great program at the University of Cincinnati, and I think that he's one of the best head coaches in all college football, no doubt about it. He definitely is capable of building up a program from the ground up in college football. And honestly, I won't be shocked if Luke Fickell one day becomes a very good NFL head coach. He'll definitely have some offers, down the road if he continues to win games at the University of Cincinnati. Is that going to be in his future? Probably, probably not. We shall see. But bottom line, I'm a big fan of Luke Fickell, and he's definitely one of the best head coaches in all college football. The future is bright at the University of Cincinnati as long as Luke Fickell is their head coach. I have one final topic to discuss in today's show. I want to discuss James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Penn State is having a very rough season in 2020. They're currently 2-5 right now, and I get it. They've had some injuries. They've had some players opt out, most notably Micah Parsons, who was one of, if not the best defensive player in all college football. Listen, I understand that the year of COVID has really had some teams, fall behind the eight ball. I get it, but there were a good amount of people that actually thought this year Penn State could compete with Ohio State and maybe possibly win the Big Ten. And they haven't come close. They're 2-5 this year. And listen, one bad year does not define a head coach, James Franklin's a good head coach. James Franklin is a good head coach, no doubt about it. He's been coaching for 10 years at the collegiate level. He's won 65% of his games. Even dating back to his days at Vanderbilt, he won a bunch of games. And that's very tough to do because Vanderbilt, they're not getting a bunch of 4 or 5-star players. And that's a very demanding academic school that a lot of student athletes just flat out cannot get into. So he won at Vanderbilt. He's definitely turned around Penn State. He's made Penn State relevant again. But aren't we at a point where we might need to start thinking about James Franklin, maybe starting to take the next step as a head coach at Penn State because you made Penn State relevant. Now we're at a point where we're 7 years in and Penn State is still not close to Ohio State. They're still not close. And I don't know if they're going to get close anytime soon. Are we at a point now where we've reached the peak and the pinnacle of James Franklin at Penn State? Because I think that might be the case. I think James Franklin can only do so many good things at Penn State. He's definitely a coach that's going to win you anywhere from 8 to 10 games most seasons. He'll get you to some bowl games. He'll win you some bowl games. But is that the ultimate goal? Is the ultimate goal to be relevant and to win bowl games? Or is it to beat Ohio State and to compete for national titles? Hey, listen, if Penn State wants to just be a relevant team that wins anywhere from 9 to 11 games each season and they're fine with the job James Franklin is doing, hey, listen, I got no problem with that. But if they think that they can compete for national titles, then James Franklin might not be the guy because Penn State has come close one time. He beat Ohio State one time a couple of seasons ago. It was a crazy game in Penn State. Penn State went on to win the Big Ten. They did not make the playoffs because they had 2 losses. So James Franklin, he's won the Big Ten once in 7 years at Penn State. I just think that Penn State might have reached their peak with James Franklin, like I said. And Penn State is going to need to make a choice this offseason. Are we going to continue to stick with James Franklin? Or are we going to tear this whole thing down and try to start all over? And by the way, when I talk about tearing things down, honestly, I don't think Penn State really is going to have to completely tear things down because James Franklin has established a good culture at Penn State. He's recruited very well. This roster has some talent. The record might not show the talent on the roster, but this is a talented group of football players. So, really, if Penn State is serious about competing with Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes, I think they need to make a change at head coach because as good as James Franklin is, I don't think James Franklin is quite good enough to consistently win Big Ten titles, and I don't think James Franklin is good enough as a head coach to knock off Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes year in and year out. So Penn State's going to need to make a tough decision. Are they going to strip things down and get rid of James Franklin, or are they going to keep James Franklin and keep trying to run this thing back to see where it takes them? Only time will tell, but in reality, James Franklin's a good head coach, but Penn State, they will need to make a choice in regards to James Franklin and the future of their program by the end of 2020. That's just my humble opinion, however. Well, people, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning into this show today. Have a God bless day, everyone. Stay safe out there, and I'm Ghost. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juice Alert Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juice Alert Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.